Research from the University of Pennsylvania found that people who reframe challenges as opportunities for identity development persist 40% longer on difficult tasks than those who view challenges as threats to their self-image. The productive person sees a difficult project not as an obstacle, but as evidence gathering for their identity. This is what disciplined people do. The identity shift also involves changing your relationship with discomfort. Stanford psychologist Kelly McGonigal's research on stress demonstrates that people who view stress as enhancing rather than debilitating show improved performance and reduced negative health impacts. Similarly, productive individuals reframe the discomfort of focus, discipline, and delayed gratification as signals of growth rather than suffering to be avoided. Maya, the marketing executive from earlier, experienced her transformation not through a new app, but through identity work. She began asking, "What would the most effective version of me do right now?" This simple question shifted her from reactive busyness to intentional productivity. Within 3 months, she reduced her work hours by 20% while increasing her measurable impact by 40%. The tactics she employed mattered less than the person she became. Becoming a productive person requires patience with the process. You're not just learning new skills, you're rewiring neural pathways and reconstructing self-concept. Research on habit formation reveals that the most challenging period occurs between days 20 and 50, when novelty is worn off, but automaticity hasn't yet set in. This is precisely when identity becomes your anchor. When motivation wanes, identity sustains you. The journey toward productivity is ultimately a journey toward self-authorship, taking deliberate control over your attention, energy, and time, rather than allowing external circumstances to dictate your days. It requires the courage to examine your current patterns honestly, the wisdom to implement changes strategically, and the patience to trust in cumulative progress. As you engage with the strategies, research, and frameworks in the chapters ahead, remember that productivity isn't about perfection or perpetual optimization. It's about aligning your daily actions with your deepest values, protecting your attention as the precious resource it is, and building systems that support your growth rather than drain your energy. The goal isn't to do everything, it's to ensure that what you do matters. Your brain is capable of remarkable focus. Your habits can be systematically rewired, and your identity can evolve to support the life and work you envision. The science is clear, the strategies are proven, and the transformation is possible. It begins with understanding that productivity isn't something you lack. It's something you cultivate, one intentional choice at a time. Chapter 1. The Psychology of a Productive Mind. Introduction. The hidden architecture of achievement productivity is not merely a matter of time management or organizational systems. It is fundamentally a psychological construct, a complex interplay of thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and identity that either propels us toward our goals or silently sabotages our progress. Before we can master the external mechanisms of productivity, we must first understand the internal landscape that shapes every decision we make, every task we undertake, and every goal we pursue. The productive mind is not born, it is cultivated. It emerges from the deliberate reshaping of mental patterns, the conscious alignment of beliefs with actions, and the strategic management of emotional states. This chapter explores the deep psychological foundations that determine whether we thrive in our endeavors or perpetually struggle against invisible barriers of our own making. How thoughts, beliefs, and emotions shape productivity, the cognitive triangle of performance. At the heart of productivity lies what psychologists call the cognitive triangle, the interconnected relationship between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. This framework, rooted in cognitive behavioral psychology, reveals that our productivity is never purely mechanical. Instead, it flows from the constant interaction of these three elements. Thoughts are the interpretations we assign to events, circumstances, and our own capabilities. When you face a challenging project, your immediate thought might be, "This is too complex for me," or "This is an opportunity to learn something valuable." These seemingly simple cognitive responses set off cascading effects throughout your psychological System emotions arise from these thoughts, coloring our experience and influencing our energy levels. The thought, "This is too complex," generates anxiety, overwhelm, and perhaps shame. Conversely, "This is an opportunity," generates curiosity, engagement, and measured confidence. These emotional states directly impact our willingness to engage with tasks and our persistence when obstacles emerge. Behaviors follow from this emotional state. Anxiety leads to avoidance, procrastination, or half-hearted effort. Curiosity and engagement lead to focused action, creative problem-solving, and sustained effort despite difficulties. Research by psychologist Albert Ellis, founder of rational emotive behavior therapy, demonstrated that it is rarely the event itself that determines our response, but rather our beliefs about the event. Two individuals facing identical deadlines will experience vastly different productivity outcomes based solely on their cognitive interpretation of the situation, the neuroscience of productive thinking. Modern neuroscience has illuminated the biological mechanisms underlying this psychological reality. When you engage in negative self-talk or catastrophic thinking, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes activated. This triggers the release of cortisol and initiates the stress response, which narrows your cognitive focus, impairs working memory, and reduces creative problem-solving capacity. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, explains that chronic stress and negative thought patterns literally change the structure of your brain through neuroplasticity. The neural pathways associated with anxiety, avoidance, and helplessness become strengthened through repeated activation, while pathways associated with initiative, persistence, and confidence atrophy from disuse. Conversely, positive cognitive patterns, realistic optimism, growth-oriented thinking, and self-efficacy beliefs activate the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, planning, and goal-directed behavior. This activation increases dopamine availability, enhancing motivation, focus, and learning capacity. Belief systems as operating software. Your beliefs function as the operating system of your productivity. They are the background programs running constantly, influencing which opportunities you notice, which challenges you accept, and which goals you pursue. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck's groundbreaking research on mindset reveals two fundamental belief systems that dramatically impact achievement: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Fixed mindset individuals believe that abilities are static and unchangeable. They view challenges as threats to their self-image, interpret effort as a sign of inadequacy, and avoid situations where they might fail. For them, productivity becomes an anxiety-inducing performance where their inherent worth is constantly being evaluated. Growth mindset individuals believe that abilities can be developed through dedication and effort. They view challenges as opportunities to expand their capabilities, interpret effort as the path to mastery, and embrace situations that stretch their current limits. For them, productivity becomes an engaging process of continuous development. The practical implications are profound. In one study, Dweck found that students with a growth mindset improved their academic performance significantly when facing difficult material, while fixed mindset students showed declining performance under the same conditions. The difference was not in initial ability, but in their beliefs about the nature of ability itself. Emotional intelligence and productivity. Emotional intelligence, the capacity to recognize, understand, and manage emotions in yourself and others, serves as a critical determinant of sustained productivity. Psychologist Daniel Goleman identified 5 components of emotional intelligence, each directly impacting productive behavior. Self-awareness, recognizing your emotional states and their impact on your performance. A self-aware person notices when frustration is building and takes a strategic break before productivity collapses. Self-regulation, managing disruptive emotions and adapting to changing circumstances. This capacity allows you to maintain focus despite anxiety, redirect anger into constructive problem-solving, and resist the immediate gratification that derails long-term goals. Motivation, harnessing emotions to pursue goals with energy and persistence. Emotionally intelligent individuals connect their daily tasks to deeper values and purposes, maintaining motivation even during monotonous or difficult work. Empathy, understanding the emotional states of others, which proves essential for collaborative productivity and effective communication. Social skills, managing relationships effectively, enabling the coordination and influence necessary for complex projects. Research consistently shows that emotional intelligence predicts professional success more reliably than IQ. A longitudinal study by TalentSmart tested more than 1 million people and found that emotional intelligence is responsible for % of performance in all types of jobs. The key: thought energy, connection, productivity requires energy, and your thoughts directly influence your available cognitive and physical energy. This isn't metaphorical, it's measurable biology. Negative rumination, worry, and self-criticism activate the sympathetic nervous system, keeping your body in a state of chronic stress arousal. This fight-or-flight state consumes enormous amounts of energy while simultaneously impairing the cognitive functions necessary for complex work. Psychologist Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion demonstrated that self-control and decision-making consume a limited resource, which he initially termed willpower. While subsequent research has nuanced this model, the fundamental insight remains valid. Mental states that create internal conflict, forcing yourself to work while believing you can't succeed, or suppressing emotions instead of processing them, consume disproportionate cognitive resources. Conversely, thoughts aligned with your values and goals create what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls flow, a state of complete absorption where action and awareness merge, self-consciousness disappears, and hours pass like minutes. Flow states are not accidents. They emerge from specific cognitive conditions, clear goals, immediate feedback, and a balance between perceived challenge and skill level. Mental narratives that sabotage progress, the stories we tell ourselves. Human beings are storytelling creatures. We don't simply experience events. We construct narratives about what those events mean, who we are, and what we're capable of achieving. These narratives, often operating beneath conscious awareness, profoundly influence our productivity. The perfectionism narrative: if I can't do it perfectly, there's no point in doing it at all. This story sounds like high standards, but functions as sophisticated procrastination. Research by psychologists Gordon Flett and Paul Hewitt distinguishes between adaptive perfectionism, pursuing excellence, and maladaptive perfectionism, avoiding failure through impossibly high standards. Maladaptive perfectionists spend enormous energy planning, preparing, and ruminating while producing minimal actual work. The narrative protects the ego. You can't fail at what you never truly attempt, but destroys productivity. The busy martyrdom narrative: I'm overwhelmed with responsibilities and demands. This narrative casts you as the noble victim of circumstances, drowning in obligations. While genuine overwhelm exists, the martyrdom narrative often serves as protection against examining priorities, setting boundaries, or acknowledging that busyness sometimes substitutes for meaningful achievement. As Tim Ferriss observes, being busy is a form of laziness, lazy thinking, and indiscriminate action. The someday narrative: I'll start when conditions are right, when I have more time, resources, knowledge, or certainty. This perpetually deferred beginning sounds prudent, but often masks fear and resistance. The narrative promises that productivity awaits just beyond some threshold, which conveniently moves forward as you approach it. The imposter narrative: I don't really deserve this success, and soon everyone will discover I'm a fraud. Psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Eames first identified imposter syndrome in high-achieving individuals who, despite external evidence of competence, remain convinced they've fooled others. This narrative creates constant anxiety, makes it difficult to internalize achievements, and leads to either over-preparation, consuming energy, or self-sabotage, confirming the belief. The special circumstances narrative: normal rules don't apply to me because of my unique situation, personality, or challenges. This story exempts you from the practices that generate productivity, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where your special circumstances guarantee continued struggle. The neuroscience of narrative. These mental narratives aren't just poetic metaphors. They create physical changes in brain function and structure. When you repeatedly tell yourself a story, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with that narrative through Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together wire together. Dr. Rick Hansen, a neuropsychologist, explains that the brain has a negativity bias. It's like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. This evolutionary adaptation, it was more important for survival to remember threats than pleasures, means that negative narratives naturally gain strength over positive ones unless we actively intervene. Narrative researchers Jennifer Pals and Dan McAdams found that the stories people tell about their lives predict well-being and productivity better than the actual events in those lives. Two people experiencing similar challenges will have vastly different outcomes based on whether they construct narratives of victimhood or growth, helplessness or agency, rewriting. Sabotaging narratives, transforming unproductive narratives, requires 3 steps. Recognition. You must first identify the stories you're telling. Journaling proves remarkably effective. Writing, "I notice I'm telling myself that," externalizes the narrative, making it visible and examinable rather than simply true. Examination. Question the narrative. Is this story based on verifiable facts or interpretation? What evidence contradicts it? What purpose does this story serve? Protection, justification, identity maintenance. Whose voice am I hearing? My own or internalized criticism from others? 3. Reconstruction. Craft an alternative narrative grounded in evidence and oriented toward growth. This isn't positive thinking or denial, it's consciously choosing interpretations that empower rather than paralyze. Instead of "I'm a procrastinator," try "I'm someone who has struggled with initiation but is developing new strategies." The second narrative acknowledges reality while preserving agency and possibility. The science of motivation and why it fades understanding. Motivation's architecture. Motivation is not a personality trait you either possess or lack. It's a dynamic psychological state emerging from the interaction of multiple factors, and understanding its mechanics allows you to cultivate it strategically rather than waiting helplessly for inspiration to strike. Psychologists Edward Desai and Richard Ryan developed self-determination theory, SDT, one of the most empirically validated frameworks for understanding human motivation. Their research identified 3 fundamental psychological needs that, when satisfied, generate intrinsic motivation. Autonomy, the need to feel that your actions originate from your own will rather than external pressure or obligation. Tasks imposed by others or performed solely for external rewards drain motivation, while self-directed activities sustain it. Competence. The need to feel effective and capable in your activities. Motivation flourishes when you're operating at the edge of your current abilities. Challenged, but not overwhelmed. A concept aligned with Csikszentmihalyi's flow state. Relatedness. The need to feel connected to others, to be part of something larger than yourself. Even solitary work gains meaning and sustained motivation when connected to relationships, communities, or purposes that matter to you. When these needs are satisfied, you experience intrinsic motivation, engagement for the inherent satisfaction of the activity itself. When they're thwarted, you're left with either extrinsic motivation, doing something for external rewards or to avoid punishment, or a motivation, lack of intention to act at all. The motivation equation peers. Steele, a motivation researcher, synthesized decades of research into what he calls the procrastination equation, which can be inverted to understand motivation. Motivation, Greener's expectancy x value, impulsiveness x delay. Expectancy, your belief that effort will lead to success. If you don't believe you can complete a task or that your efforts matter, motivation collapses regardless of how valuable the outcome might be. Value, how rewarding or meaningful the task is to you. Value encompasses both intrinsic pleasure and the importance of outcomes. Impulsiveness, your susceptibility to distraction and short-term temptations. Higher impulsiveness divides motivation. Delay, how far in the future the rewards lie. Distant outcomes feel less real and motivating than immediate ones, a phenomenon called temporal discounting. This equation explains why motivation varies across different tasks and time periods. A project might have high value but low expectancy, you doubt your ability to succeed. Or high expectancy and value but faces competition from impulsiveness and delay. The deadline is far away. In Netflix is immediately available. Why motivation fades, the inevitable decline. Many people mistakenly believe that successful individuals maintain constant high motivation. This is a dangerous myth. Motivation naturally fluctuates, and understanding why prevents the demoralization that occurs when your initial enthusiasm inevitably wanes. The novelty effect. New pursuits activate the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine that creates excitement and energy. This neurochemical boost explains why starting projects feels easier than continuing them. As novelty fades, so does this chemical support, revealing the true challenge: sustained effort without chemical assistance. The reality gap. Initial motivation often stems from idealized visions of outcomes. When reality introduces complications, tedium, or slower progress than imagined, the gap between expectation and experience drains motivation. The first draft that falls short of your vision. The workout that leaves you sore rather than transformed. The business that requires unglamorous administrative work. These reality encounters test your commitment. Ego depletion and decision fatigue. Research shows that self-control and motivation draw on limited cognitive resources. After making many decisions or exerting sustained self-control, your capacity for both diminishes. This explains why motivation often fades later in the day or during periods of high stress. The middle problem. Research on goal pursuit consistently identifies a motivation trough in the middle phase of projects. The beginning offers novelty and hope. The end provides proximity to completion. The middle, however, offers neither, creating what researchers call the messy middle, a period where progress feels simultaneously incomplete and unfinished, maximizing discouragement. Value drift. Your goals and values evolve over time. A pursuit that once aligned with your identity and aspirations may gradually lose relevance as you change. Continuing something that no longer resonates drains motivation. Yet many people persist out of sunk cost concerns or fear of appearing inconsistent. Sustaining motivation beyond willpower, relying on motivation alone guarantees failure. Instead, productive individuals create systems that work even when motivation fades. Process over outcome. Focusing on daily practices rather than distant results maintains engagement. Instead of lose 30 pounds an outcome, commit to exercise 30 minutes daily process. The latter provides immediate satisfaction and builds capability regardless of how quickly outcomes materialize. Momentum. Through minimum viable effort. When motivation is low, commit to the smallest possible action. Tell yourself you'll write for just 5 minutes or exercise for just 10. This minimum viable effort overcomes initiation resistance, the hardest part, and often once begun, you'll continue beyond the minimum. Implementation intentions. Psychologist Peter Gollwitz's research demonstrates that specific if-then plans dramatically increase follow-through. If it's 7 a.m. on a weekday, then I write for 30 minutes, removes the need for motivation at the moment of action. The decision is pre-made. You simply execute. Strategic renewal. Rather than depleting your motivational resources continuously, build in recovery. Productivity isn't about constant effort. It's about strategic oscillation between focused work and genuine restoration. The root cause of resistance and procrastination understanding. Psychological resistance procrastination is not, as commonly believed, a time management problem or a character flaw indicating laziness. It is a complex psychological phenomenon rooted in emotion regulation and identity protection. Dr. Tim Feichel, a leading procrastination researcher, defines procrastination as the voluntary, delay of an intended action, despite expecting to be worse off for the delay. This definition highlights the paradox. We consciously choose immediate relief despite knowing it creates future problems. Dr. Fuskia-Siroas's research reveals that procrastination is fundamentally an emotion regulation problem. We procrastinate, not because we don't care about deadlines or outcomes, but because we're trying to avoid the negative emotions associated with the task. Anxiety about our ability to succeed, frustration with the task's difficulty, boredom with its monotony, a resentment about its imposition. Procrastination provides immediate mood repair, the relief of avoiding these uncomfortable emotions at the cost of increased future stress. It's a short-sighted emotional trade-off that compounds over time. The 6 psychological drivers of procrastination. Perfectionism and fear of failure. When your self-worth is tied to performance, tasks become threatening. Procrastination protects the ego. If you fail after last-minute effort, you can blame insufficient time rather than inadequate ability. This preserves the belief that you could have succeeded if only you'd started earlier. Task aversion. Some tasks are genuinely unpleasant, tedious, difficult, or frustrating. The immediate discomfort of engaging outweighs the distant benefits of completion. Our present biased brains struggle to value future benefits as much as present comfort. Abstract or overwhelming goals. Vague, large goals trigger avoidance because your brain can't process them effectively. A write book overwhelms. Write 500 words on character development doesn't. Research on task motivation shows that concrete, appropriately sized tasks get done while abstract. Large ones get postponed. Low self-efficacy. If you don't believe you can successfully complete a task, why start? This belief becomes self-fulfilling as avoidance prevents the skill development that would build confidence. Impulsiveness and present bias. We systematically overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future ones. An evolutionary adaptation that served survival but undermines long-term goals. The pleasure of watching television now feels more real than the satisfaction of project completion next month. Rebellion and autonomy violation. When tasks feel imposed or controlling, procrastination becomes passive resistance, a way of asserting autonomy even at your own expense. This explains why you might procrastinate on important personal goals if they feel like shoulds rather than genuine wants. The neurobiology of resistance, understanding the brain systems involved in procrastination, illuminates why it persists despite our conscious intentions. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala, processes threats and governs immediate emotional responses. When you contemplate a challenging task, if the limbic system perceives threat, failure, judgment, difficulty, it triggers avoidance impulses. The prefrontal cortex, particularly the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, manages executive functions, planning, decision-making, and impulse control. This region enables you to override immediate impulses in service of long-term goals. Procrastination represents a failure of the prefrontal cortex to regulate the limbic system's avoidance impulses. Brain imaging studies by Dr. Caroline Schluter show that chronic procrastinators have larger amygdalae and weaker connections between the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, making emotional regulation more difficult. This isn't destiny, it's neurobiology we can influence. Practices that strengthen prefrontal function and calm the amygdala. Mindfulness meditation, cognitive reappraisal, and building mastery experiences physically change these brain systems over time, breaking the procrastination cycle. Forgive past procrastination. Research by Michael Wall found that students who forgave themselves for procrastinating on an earlier exam were significantly less likely to procrastinate on the next one. Self-criticism and guilt perpetuate the cycle by creating negative emotions that require regulation, often through more procrastination. Identify the emotion. When you notice yourself procrastinating, pause and identify what you're feeling. Anxiety, boredom, resentment. Naming the emotion activates the prefrontal cortex and reduces the amygdala's reactivity, a process psychologist Dan Siegel calls Name it to tame it. Address the underlying concern. Once you've identified the emotion, address its source directly. If anxiety about your ability is driving avoidance, break the task into smaller pieces that feel manageable. If resentment about imposition is the issue, reconnect with how this task serves your own values and goals. Reduce activation energy. Make starting easier by decreasing the steps between impulse and action. Writer Robert Boyce calls this keeping the threshold low. Lay out your workout clothes the night before. Close social media tabs before writing. Eliminate the micro-decisions that provide procrastination opportunities. Time horizon compression. Make future consequences feel more immediate. Write a letter to your future self describing the stress they'll experience if you don't act now. Use deadlines strategically, not just final deadlines, but process deadlines for intermediate steps, how your identity influences. Your habits and actions identity is the deepest level of change, most approaches to productivity. Focus on outcomes, what you want to achieve, or processes. What actions you need to take. But the deepest and most sustainable level operates at identity, who you believe you are. Writer James Clear, in Atomic Habits, argues that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Behaviors that align with your identity feel natural and require less effort, while behaviors that contradict your identity create internal resistance regardless of how beneficial they might be. Consider two people trying to quit smoking when offered a cigarette. The first says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." An outcome-focused response that preserves smoker identity while attempting to change behavior. The second says, "No thanks, I don't smoke." An identity-based response that claims a new self-concept. Research shows the second approach succeeds more often because it eliminates the internal conflict between behavior, not smoking, and identity, smoker. When your identity changes, behavior follows naturally rather than requiring constant self-control. The neuroscience of identity. Your brain contains networks that encode your self-concept, who you believe you are. These networks, particularly in the medial prefrontal cortex, activate when you think about yourself and influence which information you attend to, which memories you recall, and which goals you pursue. Neuroscientist Sam Harris explains that your sense of self, while feeling singular and stable, is actually a construction. A story your brain tells about continuity across time and consistency across situations. This construction profoundly influences behavior through a mechanism psychologists call identity verification. We're motivated to maintain consistency with our self-concept, even when that self-concept is limiting or inaccurate. This explains why people often self-sabotage when success would contradict their identity. The writer who believes, "I'm not a real author," may unconsciously avoid marketing their book. The student who identifies as not a math person won't invest serious effort in math courses because success would require identity revision. Identity-based productivity, transforming productivity through identity rather than willpower, involves a gradual but powerful shift. Audit. Current. Identity. What stories do you tell about yourself? I'm not a morning person. I'm disorganized. I'm not good with technology. These identities function as constraints, limiting which behaviors feel available. Notice particularly the identities you defend when someone suggests change. These are often the most limiting. Define desired identity. Rather than setting only outcome goals, define the type of person you want to become. Not write a book, but become a writer. Not lose weight, but become someone who takes care of their health. This identity becomes your compass, guiding daily decisions. Accumulate identity evidence. Every action is a piece of evidence for or against an identity. Want to become a writer? Write daily, even briefly. Each session proves to your brain that I am someone who writes. The quantity matters less than the consistency. You're changing identity, not just producing output. Create identity symbols. Physical environment and possessions reinforce identity. A dedicated workspace announces, "I am someone who does serious work." Running shoes by the door affirm, "I am someone who exercises." These symbols serve as external memory, reminding you who you're becoming. Join identity communities. Surround yourself with people who embody the identity you're developing. Behavior researchers call this social norming. We unconsciously adopt the behaviors and attitudes of our reference groups. Join a writing group, a fitness community, an entrepreneurship network, whatever aligns with your emerging identity. Identity resistance and transformation, changing identity, while powerful, also triggers resistance. Your current identity, even if limiting, provides certainty and belonging. Transformation threatens both. Psychologist Tara Brach describes the trance of unworthiness, a self-concept built on inadequacy that paradoxically becomes comfortable through familiarity. Some people unconsciously resist success because it would require abandoning this familiar identity. Dr. Steve Hayes, founder of acceptance and commitment therapy, teaches that psychological flexibility, the ability to be present with uncomfortable thoughts and emotions while still acting toward your values, is essential for identity transformation. You must be willing to experience the discomfort of behaving inconsistently with old identity while the new identity solidifies. The identity transition. Expect an uncomfortable middle phase where you're taking new actions but don't yet feel like the person who naturally takes them. A beginning runner doesn't yet feel like a runner. A person who's written for 2 weeks doesn't yet feel like a writer. This gap generates doubt and makes quitting tempting. Push through this phase by accumulating evidence. The neuroscience of habit formation shows that behaviors become automatic after consistent repetition. Estimates range from 18 to 254 days depending on complexity, with an average of 66 days. During this consolidation period, the behavior requires conscious effort. After it, the behavior feels natural and the identity catches up to the action. Identity and sustainable excellence. The ultimate power of identity-based productivity is sustainability. Outcome-based goals eventually complete or fail, leaving you without direction. Process-based habits require ongoing discipline. But identity-based change becomes self-reinforcing. The person you become wants to continue the behaviors that created that identity. A person who identifies as healthy doesn't need willpower to exercise. Not exercising would feel inconsistent with who they are. A person who identifies as a learner naturally seeks challenging projects and new skills. A person who identifies as someone who keeps their word follows through on commitments, because integrity is central to their self-concept. This is the difference between temporary productivity gains and permanent transformation. Changing what you do versus changing who you are. When identity shifts, productivity stops being something you force yourself toward and becomes something that flows from who you've become. Conclusion: the foundation of all that follows. Understanding the psychology of productivity. How thoughts shape emotions, emotions influence actions, narratives create limitations, motivation fluctuates predictably, resistance protects the ego, and identity governs behavior. Provides the foundation for everything that follows in this book. You cannot optimize systems, techniques, or environments until you understand the psychological landscape in which they operate. A perfect productivity system implemented by someone with self-sabotaging narratives and limiting identities will fail. Conversely, even imperfect systems succeed when built on psychological foundations of growth mindset, identity alignment, and emotional intelligence. The work ahead involves both understanding these psychological principles and implementing them through deliberate practice. Knowledge without application remains inert. But knowledge applied with consistency transforms not just your productivity, but your entire relationship with work, achievement, and personal development. You are not discovering productivity tactics to force upon an unwilling self. You are becoming someone for whom productive behavior feels natural, aligned, and sustainable. This transformation begins not with your calendar or task list, but with your mind, the thoughts you think, the stories you tell, the emotions you process, and the identity you claim. Everything that follows in this book builds on this foundation. Return to this chapter whenever you encounter resistance, whenever motivation fades, whenever you find yourself procrastinating despite your best intentions. The answers lie not in better time management, but in deeper self-understanding and the courage to become who you're capable of being. The productive mind is not a gift bestowed on the fortunate few. It is a capability cultivated through awareness, intention, and practice, available to anyone willing to examine their psychological patterns and systematically reshape them toward growth, agency, and aligned action. Your productivity journey doesn't begin with the first task on your list. It begins with the first honest look at your mind and the decision to become an architect of your own psychology rather than a prisoner of unconscious patterns. That journey starts now. Chapter 2: Clarity, Priorities, and Mental Focus, the foundation of all achievement. Why clarity matters in the modern world. We are drowning in possibilities. Every morning, we wake up to an overwhelming array of choices. Which tasks to tackle? First, which emails to answer, which projects to prioritize, which goals to pursue. This abundance of options, paradoxically, has become one of our greatest obstacles to productivity. The research is unequivocal. Decision fatigue, cognitive overload, and lack of clarity are among the primary reasons people fail to achieve their potential, regardless of their talent, resources, or motivation. Clarity is not simply knowing what you want, it's understanding why you want it, how it fits into your larger vision, and what specific actions will move you closer to that vision. Without clarity, productivity becomes a chaotic scramble, a reactive dance where you're constantly putting out fires rather than building something meaningful. With clarity, everything changes. Your energy becomes focused, your decisions become easier, and your progress becomes measurable and sustainable. Consider the groundbreaking research conducted by psychologist Gabriele Oettingen at New York University. Her decades of work on goal setting and mental contrasting revealed a stunning truth. People who simply fantasize about success often perform worse than those who never dream at all. The reason? Fantasy without clarity creates a false sense of accomplishment, triggering the brain's reward systems prematurely and reducing actual motivation to work. However, when people combine positive visualization with realistic planning, what Oettingen calls mental contrasting, their success rates skyrocket. Clarity transforms dreams from pleasant distractions into actionable roadmaps. The neuroscience supports this principle powerfully. When you lack clarity, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive function and decision-making, must work overtime to evaluate every option, assess every possibility, and weigh every potential course of action. This constant evaluation drains your cognitive resources rapidly, leaving you mentally exhausted before you've accomplished anything substantial. Brain imaging studies show that unclear goals activate multiple competing neural networks simultaneously, creating what neuroscientists call cognitive interference. This interference doesn't just slow you down, it fundamentally impairs your ability to think deeply, creatively, and strategically. In contrast, when you have crystal clear priorities, your brain can operate with remarkable efficiency. Clear goals activate the reticular activating system, RAS, a network of neurons in your brainstem that acts as a filter for incoming information. Once your RAS knows what matters, it automatically highlights relevant opportunities, information, and resources while filtering out distractions. This is why, when you decide to buy a specific car, you suddenly start seeing that model everywhere. Your RAS has been programmed to notice it. Let me share a powerful example from the business world. In 2007, Apple was primarily known as a computer company. Steve Jobs, returning from medical leave, faced a company with multiple product lines, numerous ongoing projects, and a scattered focus. During a legendary executive retreat, Jobs took a whiteboard and drew a simple 2x2 matrix. On one axis, he wrote consumer and professional. On the other, desktop and portable. He then announced that Apple would focus on creating just 4 great products, one for each quadrant. Everything else would be eliminated. This decision shocked the executives present. They argued that eliminating dozens of products and projects would cost the company opportunities, revenue, and market presence. Jobs disagreed. He understood that true productivity doesn't come from doing more, it comes from doing less, but with absolute clarity and focus. The result? Within a decade, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. Not by doing everything, but by doing a few things with unparalleled clarity of purpose. Eliminating internal chaos, the battle against mental noise. Before we can build clarity externally, we must address the chaos within. Mental noise, that constant stream of worries, unfinished tasks, competing priorities, and nagging doubts, is perhaps the single greatest threat to productivity in the modern age. This internal turbulence doesn't just distract us, it fundamentally impairs our cognitive capabilities. Dr. Sophie Leroy, a professor at the University of Washington, has conducted extensive research on what she calls attention residue. Her findings are sobering. When you switch from one task to another, your attention doesn't immediately follow. Part of your attention remains stuck on the previous task, especially if it was unbounded or unfinished. This residue accumulates throughout the day, creating a mounting cognitive burden that severely diminishes your mental performance. In one striking study, Leroy found that people who switched tasks frequently performed up to 40% worse on complex cognitive tasks compared to those who maintained focus. The Zeigarnik effect, discovered by Russian psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik in the 1920s, provides another crucial insight into mental chaos. Zeigarnik observed that waiters could remember complex orders perfectly while customers were dining, but immediately forgot them once the check was paid. She concluded that the brain holds onto incomplete tasks with much greater tenacity than completed ones. Every unfinished project, every unmade decision, every pending commitment creates an open loop in your mind, continuously demanding attention and draining cognitive resources. This understanding has profound implications for productivity. The solution isn't simply to work harder or push through the mental fog. It's to systematically close loops and create external structures that free your mind from the burden of remembering everything. David Allen's Getting Things Done, GTD methodology addresses this problem brilliantly through what he calls the mind sweep. The process is deceptively simple but transformative. You capture absolutely everything on your mind, every task, every commitment, every project, every idea, and transfer it to an external system you trust completely. The psychological relief is immediate and measurable. Studies on GTD practitioners show significant reductions in anxiety, improvements in working memory capacity, and enhanced ability to focus on demanding cognitive tasks. But mental noise isn't just about tasks and commitments, it's also about the stories we tell ourselves. Cognitive psychologists identify several patterns of internal dialogue that create unnecessary mental chaos. Catastrophic thinking involves imagining worst-case scenarios and treating them as probable realities. When you catch yourself thinking, "If I don't finish this project perfectly, my career will be ruined," you're not engaging in useful planning. You're generating anxiety that paralyzes action. Perfectionism masquerading as excellence creates impossible standards that guarantee failure. The internal voice that says, "This needs to be absolutely perfect before I can share it," often prevents you from making any progress at all. As Sheryl Sandberg wisely noted, "Done is better than perfect." Comparison and inadequacy narratives fill your mental space with thoughts about how others are further ahead, more talented, or more deserving. This comparative thinking, amplified enormously by social media, creates a constant state of psychological threat that makes focused work nearly impossible. Decision paralysis from overthinking occurs when you analyze every option so thoroughly that you never actually choose. Barry Schwartz's research on the paradox of choice demonstrates that beyond a certain point, more options lead to worse decisions and greater dissatisfaction. To eliminate these patterns of mental noise, you need more than willpower. You need systematic practices that restructure your internal environment. The daily brain dump is a practice borrowed from Julia Cameron's morning pages concept. Each morning, before engaging with any external inputs, Spend 10-15 minutes writing continuously about whatever is on your mind. Don't edit, don't organize, don't judge, just write. This practice externalizes your mental chaos, allowing you to see it clearly rather than simply feeling it vaguely. Many practitioners report that this single habit has transformed their mental clarity more than any other productivity technique. The 2-minute rule, popularized by David Allen, addresses the accumulation of small, nagging tasks. If something takes less than 2 minutes to complete, do it immediately rather than adding it to a list. This prevents the buildup of trivial tasks that create disproportionate mental burden. Research suggests that our brains don't distinguish well between large and small open loops. An unmade phone call can create as much attention residue as an unfinished report. Weekly reviews create a regular rhythm for processing accumulated mental clutter. Set aside 60-90 minutes each week to review all your projects, commitments, and goals. Update your systems, close completed loops, and make any necessary adjustments to your plans. This practice, when done consistently, creates a profound sense of control and clarity that extends throughout the week. Cognitive offloading involves deliberately transferring the burden of remembering from your brain to trusted external systems. You use calendar apps for time-based commitments, project management tools for task tracking, and note-taking systems for important information. The key is absolute trust. If you can't rely completely on your external system, your brain will continue expending energy to remember things. Let me share the story of Marcus, a software engineer who struggled with constant overwhelm despite working only on a small team. Marcus would start each day feeling anxious and scattered, jumping between tasks without real progress on anything. When we mapped out his mental landscape, we discovered he was carrying approximately 73 distinct open loops in his head. Unfinished tasks, pending decisions, potential projects, and vague commitments. No wonder he felt paralyzed. We implemented a complete brain dump over 2 hours, capturing every single item into a trusted system. Then, crucially, we made immediate decisions about each item. Some were completed right away, applying the 2-minute rule. Some were scheduled for specific times, some were delegated, and some, upon honest examination, were simply deleted as no longer relevant or important. The transformation was remarkable. Marcus reported feeling physically lighter, as though a weight had been removed from his shoulders. His focus improved dramatically. Within 3 weeks, using a consistent system of daily brain dumps and weekly reviews, his productivity had genuinely doubled, not through working longer hours, but through eliminating the internal chaos that had been sabotaging his efforts all along. Defining meaningful goals. The compass for your energy goals are not merely targets to hit. They are the organizing principles that give structure and meaning to your daily actions. Yet not all goals are created equal. Some goals genuinely motivate and inspire, channeling your energy toward meaningful achievement. Others, despite looking good on paper, drain your motivation and lead to burnout and disappointment. The distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, extensively researched by Edward Dacey and Richard Ryan in their self-determination theory, provides crucial insight here. Extrinsic goals, those pursued primarily for external rewards like money, status, or approval, provide weak and unstable motivation. When your goal is make $1 million or get promoted, your motivation fluctuates wildly based on external circumstances and comparison with others. Research consistently shows that achieving extrinsic goals often leads to disappointment rather than lasting satisfaction. Intrinsic goals, in contrast, are those connected to your core values, personal growth, and authentic interests. When your goal is develop genuine expertise in my field, or create something that helps people solve real problems, your motivation becomes self-sustaining. You draw energy from the work itself rather than depending entirely on external validation. This doesn't mean external rewards don't matter. Of course they do. But the research suggests that external rewards work best when they emerge as natural consequences of pursuing intrinsically meaningful goals rather than being the primary focus. As Daniel Pink explains in Drive, the highest levels of performance and satisfaction come when people experience autonomy, mastery. The SMART framework for goal setting has become almost cliched, but it remains valuable when properly understood. Goals should be specific, clear and unambiguous, measurable with defined success criteria, achievable, challenging but realistic, relevant, aligned with your larger objectives, and time-bound with clear deadlines. However, SMART goals can become mechanical and soulless if disconnected from deeper meaning. I recommend expanding SMART into what I call SMART E-goals, adding an emotional component. Ask yourself, how will I feel when I achieve this goal? What will it mean to me personally? What aspect of my identity or values does this goal express? This emotional connection transforms abstract targets into personal commitments. Let's examine this through a real example. Sarah, a marketing manager, initially set a goal: increase our email list by 50,000 subscribers within 6 months. This goal was perfectly SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Yet Sarah found herself procrastinating, lacking enthusiasm, and dreading the work required. When we explored the emotional dimension, we discovered that Sarah's true passion was helping small business owners build authentic connections with their customers. Her email list goal felt hollow because it was purely numerical. We reframed her goal: help 50,000 small business owners discover strategies to build genuine customer relationships, measured through email subscription growth. Within 6 months, the action remained the same, but the meaning transformed entirely. Sarah's motivation skyrocketed because the goal now connected to her core values and sense of purpose. The one thing principle, articulated by Gary Keller, asks a powerful focusing question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? This question cuts through complexity and reveals your highest leverage goals. Most people try to pursue too many goals simultaneously, spreading their energy too thin to achieve real excellence in anything. By identifying your single most important goal in each major life domain, you create clarity that enables extraordinary focus. Research on goal hierarchies supports this approach. Your goals should form a pyramid, with a few overarching aspirations at the top, your long-term vision, supported by a larger number of intermediate goals, your yearly or quarterly objectives, which in turn are supported by your daily and weekly action items. Each level should clearly connect to the level above it. When this alignment exists, even small daily tasks feel meaningful because you can trace their connection to your ultimate vision. Backward planning is a powerful technique for bridging the gap between big dreams and daily actions. Start with your ultimate goal and work backward, asking at each step, what would need to be true immediately before this goal is achieved? Continue this backward chain until you reach actions you can take today. This process transforms overwhelming ambitions into concrete, manageable steps. For instance, if your goal is publish a respected book in my field within 2 years, backward planning might look like this. Year 2, Month 12, book published and launched Year 2. Month 9, complete final edits and prepare for publication Year 2. Month 6, receive developmental editing feedback and revise Year 2. Month 3, complete first full draft Year 1. Month 12, complete 50% of first draft Year 1. Month 9, complete detailed outline and 3 sample chapters. Year 1. Month 6, clarify book's unique angle and target audience Year 1. Month 3, read 20 key books in the field and develop thesis today. Spend 30 minutes identifying the top 5 books to read. Suddenly, publishing a book doesn't feel like an impossible dream. It feels like a concrete project with clear next steps. Prioritization frameworks, the skill that multiplies. Your impact having clear goals is essential, but daily life presents far more opportunities and demands than you could possibly address. Prioritization, the ability to consistently choose the most important actions while saying no to everything else, may be the single most valuable skill for productivity. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, uses a simple but ruthless prioritization method. He once told his pilot to write down his top 25 career goals. Then Buffett instructed him to circle the 5 most important goals. "What about these other 20?" the pilot asked. Buffett replied, Everything you didn't circle just became your avoid-at-all-cost list. No matter what, these things get no attention from you until you've succeeded with your top 5. This radical clarity, not just identifying priorities, but explicitly identifying what to avoid, is what separates highly productive people from those who remain perpetually busy but never truly successful. The Eisenhower Matrix, reportedly used by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, provides a powerful framework for daily prioritization. It divides all tasks into 4 quadrants based on 2 dimensions: urgency and importance. Quadrant 1, urgent and important, crises, deadlines, emergency problems. These demand immediate attention, but should be minimized through better planning. Living constantly in Quadrant 1 leads to stress and burnout. Quadrant 2, not urgent but important. Strategic planning, relationship building, learning and development, health and prevention. This is the quadrant of extraordinary productivity. Time spent here prevents future crises, builds capabilities, and creates sustainable success. Yet because these activities aren't urgent, they're perpetually postponed by those who lack clear priorities. Quadrant 3, urgent but not important. Interruptions, many emails and meetings. Other people's priorities disguised as your own. These activities feel productive because they're urgent, but they contribute little to your actual goals. The key is learning to delegate, defer, or decline these demands. Quadrant 4, neither urgent nor important. Busy work, many social media activities, excessive entertainment. These are time wasters, pure and simple. Awareness of how much time you spend here can be shocking and transformative. Research by productivity expert Stephen Covey suggests that highly effective people spend 70–80% of their time in Quadrant 2, compared to just 15–20% for average performers. This single shift, dedicating the majority of your time to important but not urgent activities, may be the most powerful productivity strategy available. The 80–20 principle, or Pareto principle, discovered by economist Vilfredo Pareto, reveals that roughly 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. This principle applies remarkably widely. 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. 80% of your productivity comes from 20% of your working hours. 80% of your learning comes from 20% of your reading. The implications for prioritization are profound. If you can identify the vital 20% and focus your energy there, you can multiply your impact by 4 or 5 times without working any harder. Applying the 80–20 principle requires regular analysis. Each month, review your activities and honestly assess which tasks and projects generated the most valuable results, which consumed time but contributed little. Be ruthless in identifying your personal 80–20 split, and systematically shift your time toward your highest leverage activities. Time blocking transforms prioritization from an abstract concept into concrete daily practice. Instead of maintaining a simple to-do list and hoping to find time for important work, you proactively schedule specific time blocks for your priorities. Cal Newport, author of Deep Work, practices what he calls time block planning. Every day, he assigns every hour to a specific activity, ensuring that his most important work receives protected time when his energy and focus are highest. Research on implementation intentions, pioneered by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer, demonstrates why time blocking works so powerfully. When you make a specific plan, I will work on my book from 8 to 10 a.m. in my home office, you're dramatically more likely to follow through than if you simply intend to work on my book when I have time. The specificity triggers automatic execution, bypassing the need for willpower and decision-making in the moment. Let me share the transformation of James, a consultant who felt perpetually overwhelmed by client demands. James would start each day planning to work on an important strategic initiative, but constant interruptions, emails, calls, urgent client requests would derail his intentions. By day's end, he'd accomplished numerous tasks, but made zero progress on what mattered most. This pattern repeated for months. We implemented a radical time-blocking strategy. James blocked 8 and 11 a.m. every day as project time, completely unavailable for meetings, emails, or calls. He informed his clients and colleagues that he'd respond to all non-emergency communications after 11 a.m. Initially, he worried this would damage his client relationships. The opposite occurred. His clients respected his boundaries, and his strategic work improved so dramatically that he delivered better results in less total time. Within 3 months, James had completed 2 major projects that had languished for over a year. The hell yes or no decision filter, popularized by entrepreneur Derek Sivers, provides a simple but powerful prioritization heuristic. When considering a new commitment, opportunity, or project, ask yourself, is this a hell yes? If it's not an enthusiastic, definite yes, it should be a no. This filter forces you to recognize that everything you say yes to means saying no to something else. By raising your standards for commitment, you ensure that your time goes only to your highest priorities. Building daily structure. The architecture of deep focus structure is often misunderstood as the enemy of creativity and freedom. In reality, the right structure is what enables both. Without clear daily structure, you waste precious cognitive resources on constant decision-making. When should I start working? What should I work on? When should I take a break? This perpetual decision burden creates decision fatigue that leaves you depleted before you've done any meaningful work. The most productive people don't rely on willpower and moment-to-moment decision-making. They build systems and routines that make productive behavior automatic. As Aristotle observed over 2 millennia ago, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The power of morning routines has been extensively documented in both research and the practices of high achievers. The first 60-90 minutes after waking represent a unique window of opportunity. Your willpower is at its peak. Your mind hasn't yet been fragmented by external demands, and you have the opportunity to set the psychological tone for your entire day. Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning Framework has helped thousands of people transform their productivity through a structured morning routine encompassing 6 practices. He calls them savers: silence, meditation; affirmations, stating your goals and values; visualization, imagining successful outcomes; exercise, physical movement; reading, learning and inspiration; and scribing, journaling. While you don't need to adopt this exact formula, the principle is powerful. Begin each day with practices that ground you, energize you, and connect you to your priorities before reacting to external demands. Neuroscience research supports the power of morning routines through understanding ultradian rhythms, natural cycles of alertness that occur throughout the day. For most people, cognitive performance peaks within the first few hours after waking. This is your golden time for your most demanding, creative, and important work. Squandering this peak performance window on email, meetings, or administrative tasks is like having a superpower but forgetting to use it. Energy management over time. Management represents a crucial shift in thinking about productivity. Time is fixed. Everyone has the same 24 hours. But energy, physical, mental, and emotional, is variable and manageable. The research of Tony Schwartz and the Energy Project has shown that managing energy, not time, is the key to high performance and sustained productivity. Human beings are not designed to operate at constant intensity. We naturally move through cycles of exertion and recovery, similar to the ultradian rhythms mentioned earlier. Research suggests we can maintain peak focus for approximately 90-120 minutes before needing recovery. Working against these natural rhythms, trying to maintain constant focus for hours, actually reduces total productivity compared to working in aligned intervals with genuine breaks. The Pomodoro technique, developed by Francesco Cirillo, provides a simple but powerful framework for working with your natural energy cycles. You work with complete focus for 25 minutes, 1 Pomodoro, then take a 5-minute break. After 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer 15-30-minute break. This rhythm prevents both mental fatigue and the false urgency that leads to poor decision-making. The magic of the Pomodoro technique isn't just the breaks. It's the psychological commitment to focused work during the intervals. When you know a break is coming soon, it's easier to resist distractions and maintain concentration. Research by Professor Alejandro Lleras found that brief diversions during long tasks actually improve focus and performance, contradicting the intuition that breaks are simply time off from productivity. Environmental design plays a vastly underappreciated role in sustainable focus. Your physical environment sends constant signals to your brain about what behaviors are expected and supported. Small changes in your workspace can have surprisingly large impacts on your productivity. Dr. Libby Sanders' research at Bond University in Australia examines how workplace design affects cognitive performance. Her findings demonstrate that factors like natural light, plants, temperature, and noise levels significantly impact concentration, creativity, and task completion. Open offices, despite their popularity, consistently underperform private spaces for deep cognitive work. The cost of constant interruptions and ambient noise far exceeds any benefits from spontaneous collaboration. Create what I call a focus sanctuary, a specific physical space associated exclusively with deep work. This space should have minimal distractions, good lighting, comfortable temperature, and everything you need within reach, so you never have an excuse to interrupt your flow. Over time, simply entering this space will trigger a focused mental state through associative conditioning. The concept of deep work, articulated by Cal Newport, deserves special emphasis. Deep work is professional activity performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their limit. This is the kind of work that creates real value, builds expertise, and produces genuine satisfaction. Yet modern life conspires against deep work through constant interruptions, shallow tasks, and the seductive pull of digital distraction. Newport's research reveals that the ability to perform deep work is becoming simultaneously more rare and more valuable in the economy. Those who can regularly enter and sustain deep focus states will have an enormous competitive advantage in almost any knowledge work domain. But deep work is a skill that must be deliberately cultivated. It won't happen by accident. Building deep work capacity requires what Newport calls deep work rituals, consistent practices that train your ability to focus intensely. Start with shorter sessions. Even 30 minutes of genuine deep work is valuable, and gradually increase duration as your concentration stamina improves. Treat deep work sessions as sacred. Turn off notifications, close unnecessary applications, and perhaps even disconnect from the internet if possible. The role of recovery cannot be overstated. Productivity isn't about working every possible hour. It's about working intensely when you work and recovering completely when you rest. Research on elite performers across domains, from athletes to musicians to scientists, consistently shows that they work in focused bursts with complete recovery in between, rather than working at moderate intensity for extended periods. Recovery includes micro breaks during the workday, genuine leisure in the evenings, complete disconnection on weekends, and regular vacations. Each level of recovery serves a different purpose. Micro breaks prevent attention fatigue. Evening leisure allows mental processing and consolidation. Weekends provide perspective and prevent burnout. Vacations allow for the deep restoration that enables sustained high performance. The paradox of recovery is that it often feels unproductive and creates guilt among ambitious people. But the research is clear. People who prioritize recovery and work-life boundaries consistently outperform those who attempt to work constantly. Brad Stulberg and Steve Magnus, in Peak Performance, demonstrate that growth, whether physical, mental, or professional, occurs during recovery periods, not during the stress itself. The stress creates the stimulus, but recovery is where the adaptation happens. Practical implementation, from theory to transformative practice. Understanding these principles intellectually is valuable, but transformation requires practical implementation. Let me provide you with a concrete 30-day plan to build clarity, establish priorities, and create sustainable focus in your own life. Week 1, complete clarity. Capture day 1 to 2. Perform a complete brain dump. Capture absolutely everything on your mind. Tasks, projects, ideas, commitments, worries. In a notebook or digital tool. Don't organize yet. Just capture everything. Day 3-4. Process your captured items. Categorize them. Immediate actions, projects, multi-step outcomes, Someday may be ideas, reference information, and trash. Be ruthless in eliminating or delegating non-essential items. Day 5 to 7. Create your goal hierarchy. Identify 2-3 overarching long-term goals, your 2 to 5 year vision. Then break these into quarterly objectives and weekly milestones. Ensure clear line of sight from daily actions to ultimate vision. Week 2. Prioritization, Systems Day. 8 to 9. Map your activities into the Eisenhower matrix. Track everything you do for 2 days, then categorize each activity. Calculate what percentage of time you currently spend in each quadrant. Day 10 to 12. Identify your personal 80-20 split. Review the past month. Which activities generated the most value? Which consumed time but contributed little? Create your focus list, your vital 20%, and your minimize list, activities to eliminate or delegate. Day 13 set to 14. Design your ideal week. Using time blocking, create a template showing when you'll do different types of work. Deep work sessions, meetings, administrative tasks, learning time, and personal activities. Week 3. Environmental and Routine Design Day. 15 to 17. Optimize your physical environment. Redesign your workspace to minimize distractions and support focus. Remove or hide anything that doesn't serve your priorities. Day 18 to 21. Implement a morning routine. Choose 3 to 5 practices that will ground you, energize you, and connect you to your priorities. Commit to this routine for at least 30 days before evaluating or adjusting. Week 4. Deep Work Practice and Refinement Day, 22-25. Begin daily deep work sessions. Start with 60-minute blocks of completely distraction-free focus on your highest priority work. Track your ability to maintain focus and gradually increase session length. Day 26 to 28. Implement systematic recovery. Schedule genuine breaks, establish a work end time, and create a shutdown ritual that allows you to mentally disconnect in the evening. Day 29 to 30. Review and refine. Assess what's working and what needs adjustment. Celebrate your progress and commit to continuing these practices. Conclusion: the compound effect of clarity and focus, the KI. Principles in this chapter are not quick fixes or life hacks. They are foundational practices that, when implemented consistently, create compound effects over time. In the first week, you might notice only modest improvements. After a month, the changes become more significant. After 6 months, you'll hardly recognize your former pattern of scattered effort and chronic overwhelm. After a year, you'll have achieved things that once seemed impossible, not through superhuman effort, but through the steady application of clarity, intelligent prioritization, and structured focus. Remember that productivity is ultimately about impact, not activity. It's about creating meaningful results aligned with your deepest values and aspirations. Clarity gives you direction. Prioritization gives you focus. Structure gives you sustainability. Together they form the foundation not just of achievement, but of a life well lived, productive not just in work but in meaning, growth, and contribution. The journey from chaos to clarity, from overwhelm to focused achievement, begins with a single decision: the decision to take control of your attention, your priorities, and your daily structure. You already have everything you need to begin. The question is not whether you're capable, you absolutely are. The question is whether you're willing to commit to the practices that will unlock that capability. The answer, I hope, is yes. Chapter 3. Discipline, Habits and Systems, the Architecture of Automatic Excellence in 2003. Researchers at Duke University published a finding that changed our understanding of human behavior. Approximately 40 to 45% of our daily actions aren't decisions at all, they're habits. Automated responses our brains execute without conscious thought. This means nearly half of what you do today, you'll do tomorrow. Not through careful consideration, but through neurological automation. This revelation is both humbling and empowering. It means your current life is largely a product of your habits, not your intentions. But it also means that by mastering habit formation, you can redesign your life at its foundation. Most people approach productivity with the wrong framework. They believe success requires constant motivation and iron willpower. They wake up each morning, trying to force themselves through the day using sheer mental force. This approach inevitably fails because it fights against fundamental human neurology. Sustainable success doesn't come from willpower, it comes from systems. The neuroscience of habit formation. When you perform a new behavior, your brain actively processes each component. Neurons fire across multiple regions, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making. But with repetition, something fascinating happens. Your brain, constantly seeking efficiency, gradually transfers control from the energy-intensive prefrontal cortex to the basal ganglia, a more primitive, efficient brain structure. Dr. Anne Graybiel at MIT describes this as the brain creating chunks, neural shortcuts that bundle action sequences into single, automatic routines. This is why driving feels overwhelmingly complex during your first lesson, but becomes nearly effortless after months of practice. The behavior has been chunked, automated, and moved to your basal ganglia, freeing your conscious mind for other tasks. When you successfully build a habit, you're not just creating a behavior, you're rewiring your brain's architecture, building neural highways that execute complex behaviors with minimal cognitive load. The habit loop: cue, craving response, reward. Every habit follows a 4-phase cycle. The cue triggers your brain to initiate behavior, a time, location, emotional state, or preceding action. When your phone buzzes, or you walk past a coffee shop, that's a cue. The craving is the motivational force behind the habit. You don't crave the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. You don't want to check your phone. You want to know what notifications await. The response is the actual habit performed. Whether it occurs depends on the friction involved and your capability. If an action requires more effort than you're willing to expend, you won't do it. The reward satisfies your craving and teaches your brain which actions are worth remembering. If the reward is positive, your brain encodes this sequence for future use. Understanding this loop reveals the leverage points for habit change. You cannot eliminate a bad habit, you can only replace it. Neural pathways never truly disappear. They become dormant. This is why recovering addicts struggle decades after sobriety. But you can overwrite patterns by maintaining the same cue and reward while changing the routine. Why systems obliterate. Willpower is a dangerous myth. Research by Roy Baumeister revealed that willpower operates like a muscle. It fatigues with use. Every decision, every resisted temptation, every choice drains a limited reservoir of mental energy. By day's end, your willpower is depleted, leaving you vulnerable to poor choices. Systems, by contrast, are sustainable. A system is a collection of interconnected habits and environmental designs that guide behavior automatically. Systems don't require motivation or depend on how you feel. They work whether you're inspired or exhausted. James Clear's wisdom captures this perfectly. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Goals tell you where you want to go. Systems get you there. Consider 2 people wanting to write a book. Person A sets a goal for 300 pages by year's end, relying on daily motivation. Progress is erratic and willpower dependent. Person B builds a system. Every morning at 6:30 a.m. after pouring coffee, they write for 45 minutes. No quality judgment, just execution. Over time, the system compounds. After 6 months, Person B has 130-plus writing sessions completed, while Person A still waits for motivation. The 2-minute rule, starting small. The most common mistake in habit formation is starting too big. People commit to running 5 miles daily or writing 2,000 words each morning. These ambitious goals violate a fundamental principle. New habits should be easy. The 2-minute rule states that when starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes. Want to read more? Commit to 1 page, not 30. Want to exercise? Commit to putting on workout clothes, not a 45-minute session. Want to meditate? Commit to 3 deep breaths, not 20 minutes. This seems absurd. 1 page won't transform your knowledge. But that's not the point. You're establishing behavior, proving you're the type of person who shows up. You're building identity, not results. Once you've read that page, you'll often continue. Once you've changed into workout clothes, you'll probably exercise. The hardest part of any task is starting. The 2-minute rule eliminates that barrier. B.J. Fogg's research at Stanford consistently demonstrates that people who master tiny behaviors develop confidence that naturally expands. The woman committing to 2 push-ups daily eventually does sets of 20. The man flossing 1 tooth eventually flosses them all. Each small action is a vote for your new identity. Identity-based habits, becoming your future. Most people approach habits wrong, focusing on outcomes. I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to write a book. These outcome-based goals don't address who you need to become to achieve them. There's a more powerful approach, identity-based habits. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, focus on who you wish to become. The goal isn't to read a book, it's to become a reader, not to run a marathon, but to become a runner. Not to learn guitar, but to become a musician. This distinction is transformative. When habits align with identity, motivation becomes less relevant. You're not forcing yourself to do something foreign, you're acting in accordance with who you are. Consider 2 people quitting smoking. When offered a cigarette, the first says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." The second says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." The first still identifies as a smoker attempting to resist. The second has adopted a new identity. Research shows the second person has dramatically higher success rates. Your identity emerges from your habits. Every action is a vote for who you wish to become. No single instance transforms your beliefs, but as votes accumulate, so does evidence of your new identity. This creates a virtuous cycle. Habits shape identity, which shapes habits, implementation. First, decide who you want to be. Get specific. What would a healthy person do? What would a creative person do? Second, prove it with small wins. Your identity is your collection of self-beliefs, and beliefs require evidence. Want to become a writer? Write 100 words daily. That's evidence. Third, gradually raise the bar as identity solidifies. Environmental design, making good habits. Inevitable. Your environment is the invisible hand shaping your behavior. You might believe you make deliberate choices through conscious intention, but research reveals a humbler truth. Your environment often decides for you. Kurt Lewin proposed behavior, person, environment. Modern neuroscience validates this repeatedly. Your brain constantly scans for cues, triggering automatic responses. The more obvious the cue, the more powerful its pull. A Cornell University experiment placed candy bowls in different office locations. On desks, workers ate 9 pieces daily. In drawers, 6 pieces. Across the room, 4 pieces. A 6-foot distance reduced consumption by more than half. Same candy, same people, different environment. For habits you want to build, reduce friction, the effort required to perform a behavior. Want morning exercise? Sleep in workout clothes. Want healthier eating? Place fruit on your counter. Bury junk food in the back of your pantry. Want to read more? Place a book on your pillow each morning. For habits you want to eliminate, increase friction. Want less television? Unplug it after each use and remove remote batteries. The 20 seconds required often breaks the automatic response. Want less social media? Delete apps from your phone. Additional friction creates decision points where automatic behavior becomes conscious choice. Create dedicated spaces for specific behaviors. Your brain associates environments with particular actions. When you consistently perform the same activity in the same location, that location becomes a cue. This is why working productively in your relaxation space is difficult. Environmental cues, conflict. If possible, create dedicated spaces. A desk for work, a chair for reading, a corner for meditation. Habit stacking. Linking new behaviors to existing routines. Habit stacking leverages existing neural pathways as cues for new behaviors. The formula. After current habit, I will new habit. Examples. After I pour morning coffee, I'll write 3 gratitudes. After I sit for lunch, I'll drink a full glass of water. After I close my laptop at day's end, I'll write tomorrow's 3 priorities. After I remove work shoes, I'll immediately change into workout clothes. This works because you're using an already automatic behavior as the trigger for your new habit. You're not trying to remember execution out of nowhere, you're tying it to something you do reliably. Select the right anchor habit. It should be specific in time and location, already consistent, and a natural trigger. Choose habits you do daily without fail. Brushing teeth, pouring coffee, sitting at your desk, turning off bedroom lights. You can build chains where each behavior triggers the next. After I wake up, I'll drink water. After I drink water, I'll stretch for 3 minutes. After I stretch, I'll meditate for 5 minutes. After meditation, I'll journal for 10 minutes. This creates a morning routine where each behavior flows naturally into the next, a single macro habit. Breaking bad habits. Replacement, not elimination. You cannot eliminate a bad habit. Neural pathways never fully disappear. Attempting elimination. Through willpower leaves a void your brain seeks to fill, often with the same behavior. The solution is replacement. Keep the same cue and reward, but insert a different routine. Neuroscientist Judson Brewer discovered something remarkable about breaking bad habits. The key is curiosity rather than fighting. In smoking cessation, studies, those practicing mindful awareness of cravings, observing with curiosity rather than judgment, were twice as likely to quit compared to traditional willpower methods. The process. First, identify the cue. What triggers the unwanted behavior? Track it for a week, noting what happens immediately before. Patterns will emerge. Second, identify the reward. What craving does the habit satisfy? Experiment with different rewards to discover the true need. Third, insert a new routine satisfying the same craving. If afternoon snacking is driven by rest needs, replace it with a walk. If driven by social connection, replace it with colleague conversations. Fourth, make the bad habit difficult while building the replacement. Writer Nir Eyal suggests pre-commitment, making advanced decisions eliminating the need for in-the-moment willpower. Use website blockers during work hours, ask friends to change your social media passwords, or schedule automatic savings transfers before you can spend money. The power of social reinforcement. Human behavior is profoundly influenced by social context. The Framingham Heart Study revealed behaviors spread through networks like viruses. If your friend becomes obese, your obesity risk increases 57%. If your friend quits smoking, you're 36% more likely to quit. If your friend becomes happy, your happiness likelihood increases 15%. These effects extend beyond direct friendships. Your social environment may be the most powerful factor determining your habits. If surrounded by people whose habits conflict with your goals, you're fighting uphill. If your social circle prioritizes entertainment over growth, your learning commitment will constantly be tested. Leverage social reinforcement. Join a tribe sharing your desired identity. Find communities aligned with who you want to become. Create accountability partnerships with one person committed to similar goals. Share daily progress, celebrate wins, discuss challenges. Knowing someone is watching dramatically increases follow-through. Make habits public. Public commitments are more powerful than private ones. Design social consequences through financial commitments, which research shows increases follow-through. The plateau of latent potential progress is not linear. Most expect immediate, consistent results. Visible changes after a week of workouts, completed work after a month of writing. This expectation sets them up for disappointment and abandonment. James Clear describes the plateau of latent potential. Imagine an ice cube at 25 degrees Celsius. Temperature rises 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31 degrees. The ice remains solid. Nothing appears to happen. Energy seems wasted. Then, at 32 degrees, the ice melts. 1 degree triggers massive transformation. Habits work the same way. You work diligently for weeks with minimal visible results. Efforts feel futile. You're tempted to quit. Then suddenly, breakthrough. Small improvements accumulate, cross a threshold, and produce dramatic results. Bamboo provides another metaphor. You plant a bamboo seed and water it daily. For 4 years, nothing visible happens. Then, in the 5th year, it grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. Was it growing those first 4 years? Absolutely. It was developing a massive underground root system supporting eventual rapid growth. Your habits are building root systems. Work done today won't show results today, this week, or even this month. But it's accumulating, compounding, building infrastructure, supporting exponential growth. This is why consistency trumps intensity. The person exercising moderately 6 days weekly achieves far more than the person with occasional intense marathons. Consistency allows compounding, implementation intentions. Turning goals into scripts, implementation intentions, specify exactly when, where, and how you'll act. The formula: I will behavior at time in location. Examples: I will write for 30 minutes at 6 a.m. at my desk. I will run at 5:30 p.m. on the trail behind my house. I will meditate for 10 minutes at noon in the spare bedroom. Over 100 studies show implementation intentions significantly increase follow-through. One meta-analysis of 8,000+ participants found they increased goal achievement likelihood 2 to 3 times compared to vague goals. They're effective because they eliminate decision points that derail behavior. With vague commitments, each day requires new decisions about whether, when, where, and what. By the time you've navigated these decisions, mental energy is depleted and motivation has waned. Implementation intentions preempt these points. When 6 a.m. arrives, there's no decision. You already decided. Your only job is execution. Enhance with contingency planning. If obstacle X occurs, then I will respond with Y. Examples: if it's raining for my morning run, I'll do a 20-minute indoor workout instead. If I miss my morning writing due to an early meeting, I'll write during lunch. These prevent the what the hell effect where one missed instance leads to complete abandonment. Contingency planning creates flexibility within commitment, preventing single failures from becoming complete derailments. Habit tracking. Making progress. Visible: what gets measured gets managed. Habit tracking makes progress visible, creating motivation and accountability. The most effective tracking is simple. A calendar where you draw an X on every completion day works perfectly. Jerry Seinfeld used this for writing jokes. Every day he wrote, he marked an X. After a few days, he had a chain. The goal: don't break the chain. Each X is evidence of your new identity. Each completed day increases commitment to maintaining the streak. Breaking a long streak feels costly. You don't want to waste accumulated effort. This loss aversion motivates consistency. Tracking reveals patterns you might miss. Maybe you always skip meditation on Thursdays. Examining your calendar, you realize Thursday is your longest workday. Armed with this insight, you can adjust your schedule or create specific Thursday implementation intentions. Research by Dr. Gail Matthews found people who wrote down goals and tracked progress achieved significantly more than those who only thought about goals. Recording creates self-accountability and makes abstract aspirations concrete. Key principles: keep it simple. The easier to track, the more likely you'll maintain it. Track immediately after completion for instant satisfaction. Never miss twice. Missing once is inevitable and not fatal. Missing twice begins forming a new habit, the habit of not doing the habit. Focus on process over outcome. Track behaviors, not results. Don't track lost 2 pounds. Track worked out 30 minutes. Building your keystone habit. Some habits trigger cascades of other positive behaviors, keystone habits. Exercise is common. People who start exercising often spontaneously eat better. Sleep consistently, become more productive, show more patience, and spend less on impulses. One habit triggers a chain reaction. The reason is physiological. Exercise improves mood, energy, cognition, and psychological. Exercise strengthens your healthy choice identity, influencing all subsequent decisions. Other common keystone habits: making your bed each morning, planning your day the night before, daily meditation, family dinners, consistent sleep schedules. The specific keystone varies by individual, but they share characteristics. They create small wins, shifting how you see yourself, provide structure to other life areas, and generate momentum, naturally extending to other domains. When designing your habit architecture, identify your keystone habit, the single behavior triggering the largest cascade of positive changes. Focus energy on establishing this first, trusting other improvements will follow naturally. The long game, patience, and compound growth. We live in a culture obsessed with hacks, shortcuts, and rapid transformation. This impatience is the enemy of genuine, sustainable change. The most powerful forces in the universe, compound interest, evolution, erosion, operate slowly. Small forces, applied consistently over long periods, produce extraordinary results. A 1% daily improvement doesn't seem significant. It's barely noticeable. But over a year, 1% daily improvement compounds to being 37 times better. The math, 101365, 3778. Conversely, 1% daily decline, 0.99365, shuck 0.03. The difference between improvement and decline is a tiny daily choice, but the cumulative effect is profound. This is transformation mathematics. You don't need to change your life in a day. You need to change your day and let those changes compound. Warren Buffett attributes his success to compound interest, not just financially, but in knowledge, relationships, and reputation. He reads for hours daily, trusting accumulated knowledge will compound over decades. His wealth didn't appear suddenly. 99% came after age 50. It's the result of consistent habits maintained over 60-plus years. Conclusion: the path forward excellence is not an act, but a habit. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. You don't become disciplined through heroic willpower. You become disciplined through accumulated evidence of small actions executed consistently over time. The habits you build today determine who you'll become tomorrow. Each action is a vote for your identity. Each small behavior is a brick in your life's architecture. The question isn't whether you'll build habits. You will, inevitably. The question is whether you'll build them deliberately or allow random formation. This chapter provided neurological understanding, practical frameworks, and strategic tools to build habits serving your highest aspirations. You understand how habits form, why systems outperform willpower, how to break old patterns and replace them with productive routines, how to build self-discipline through identity and repetition, and how to create automatic behaviors maintaining consistency. Now comes the only part that matters: application. Knowledge without action is entertainment. Start absurdly small. Choose one tiny behavior aligned with who you want to become. Make it so easy you can't refuse. Execute daily. Track it. Never miss twice. Trust the process. Allow time and consistency to compound efforts into extraordinary results. Your future self, living 5 years from now in the compound interest of your daily choices, is counting on today's decisions. Make them wisely. Make them systematically. Make them understanding that small actions, repeated consistently, are the most powerful change force available to any human being. The path to excellence isn't a single heroic leap. It's 1,000 tiny steps in the right direction, taken daily, until one day you look up and realize you've arrived at a once impossibly distant destination. Begin now. Chapter 4. Eliminating Distractions and Mastering Deep Work. The attention crisis. Why focus has become the scarcest resource. We live in an unprecedented era of distraction. Microsoft research suggests the average attention span has fallen from 12 seconds in 2000 to just 8 seconds today. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine found that office workers are interrupted or switch tasks every 3 minutes and 5 seconds on average. More alarmingly, after an interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully return to the original task. Deep work, focused, undistracted cognitive effort has become increasingly rare. Yet paradoxically, it has never been more valuable. In an economy where shallow work is being automated rapidly, the ability to perform deep work represents perhaps the single most important competitive advantage you can develop. Cal Newport argues we're facing a fundamental mismatch between our cognitive architecture and our modern environment. Our brains evolved to notice sudden movements and respond to novelty. Today, these mechanisms make us vulnerable to constant distraction. Neuroscience reveals why distraction is so damaging. Your brain has 2 attention systems, bottom-up and top-down networks. The bottom-up system operates automatically, pulling attention towards sudden stimuli. The top-down system requires conscious effort and enables sustained focus on chosen tasks. These systems, are fundamentally antagonistic. When one is active, the other is suppressed. Every distraction triggers your bottom-up system, forcibly deactivating your top-down focus. Research shows it can take several minutes for the top-down system to fully reactivate after an interruption. Internal distractions. The enemy. Within, much of our distraction originates from within. Psychologist Joseph Goldstein observes that the untrained mind is like a drunken monkey stung by a bee, wildly restless, constantly jumping from thought to thought. Modern neuroscience has confirmed these insights. When not actively engaged in a task, your brain activates the default mode network, DMN. Research by Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert found people's minds wandered 46.9% of the time. Moreover, mind-wandering was a significant predictor of unhappiness. Practical strategies for managing internal distractions. The 10-minute rule. When you feel the urge to check something, make a deal. I'll continue focused work for just 10 more minutes. Often, the urge passes within this window. Urge surfing. Observe the urge to get distracted, like a scientist studying a phenomenon. Notice where you feel it in your body. Research shows urges typically peak within minutes and naturally subside if you don't act on them. The distraction list. Keep a notepad open for capturing distracting thoughts during focus sessions. Write it down immediately and return to work. Meditation practice. Even 10 minutes of daily meditation, sustained over weeks, measurably increases your ability to sustain attention and resist distraction. Pre-commitment strategies. Create explicit barriers to distraction before beginning deep work. Use apps that block distracting websites, put your phone in another room, close unrelated browser tabs. External distractions. Engineering your environment for focus willpower alone is insufficient. Your environment exerts powerful influence on behavior. A well-designed environment makes focus the path of least resistance. Visual environment optimization. Everything in your field of vision sends a signal to your brain. Research by Sabine Kastner at Princeton demonstrates the visual cortex processes everything simultaneously. The solution is radical simplicity. Clear your workspace of everything except what's immediately necessary for your current task. Acoustic environment management. Research in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that office noise significantly impairs complex cognitive tasks. Intelligible speech is far more distracting than ambient noise at the same volume. Practical acoustic. Interventions, noise cancelling. Headphones deliberate music selection. Lyrics distract from language-based work. White noise or nature sounds. Strategic silence for demanding work, social environment, and interruption management. Research shows workers in open offices experience 64% more interruptions than those in private offices. Strategies. When you can't control your environment, visible focus indicators, wearing headphones, scheduled availability windows, asynchronous, communication norms, strategic remote work digital. Noise, the modern epidemic of overstimulation. The average person touches their phone 617 times per day and spends approximately 4 hours daily on smartphones. The smartphone isn't just a convenient tool, it's a deliberately engineered attention extraction device. Tristan Harris has documented how tech companies employ teams specifically to maximize engagement. These systems exploit what B.F. Skinner called variable ratio reinforcement, the most powerful schedule for creating compulsive behavior. Comprehensive digital minimalism strategies, smartphone, rehabilitation, notification elimination. Turn off all notifications except direct human contact app removal. Delete social media apps entirely from your phone grayscale mode. Change your display to grayscale physical separation. Don't carry your phone constantly. Designated phone time. Check 3 times daily instead of constantly computer environment optimization. Single tasking interface. Display only what's immediately relevant. Browser tab, discipline. Limit to 3 to 5 tabs maximum. Website blocking. Use Freedom, Cold Turkey, or Leech block email protocols. Check only 2 to 3 times daily at designated times. The 30-day digital declutter. Cal Newport recommends taking a 30-day break from optional digital technologies. The purpose is the reset that allows you to thoughtfully reintroduce technologies with clear intention. Flow states. The peak of human performance flow represents complete absorption in activity where self-consciousness dissolves and performance reaches its peak. Preconditions for flow challenge skill balance. The task must be challenging enough to demand full attention, but not so difficult you become anxious. Clear goals and immediate feedback. When you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish and can immediately tell whether you're succeeding, your mind can fully commit. Elimination of distractions. You cannot enter flow while being interrupted or while part of your mind remains vigilant for potential interruptions. Rituals and triggers. These can be deliberately developed to facilitate flow entry, specific locations, particular playlists, brief meditations, consistent times of day. Protecting your time and attention in the modern attention economy, your focus is literally the most valuable resource you possess. You must adopt attention capital theory. Treat your attention as a finite, invaluable asset that must be invested wisely. Practical strategies. Attention budget. Each day you have 3 to 4 hours of genuinely focused, in deep work capacity time, blocking for attention protection. Saying no strategically. As Warren Buffett observed, really successful people say no to almost everything. Creating response, friction, batch processing for reactive work, monthly attention, audit, attention recovery practices, time in nature, physical exercise, face-to-face social interaction, practical deep work techniques for long-term improvement, the 12-week deep work training program, weeks. 1-2. Baseline, basic distraction elimination, daily meditation, 5 minutes. 1 60-minute deep work session, daily weeks 3 to 4, extending duration. Increase meditation to 10 minutes. Extend deep work to 90 minutes, weeks 5 to 6. Adding complexity, add second deep work session. Implement time blocking for entire workday, weeks 7 to 8. Building rituals, develop pre-work ritual. Implement batch processing for email, weeks 9 to 10. Flow state cultivation, deliberately create flow preconditions. Extend deep work blocks to 3 hours when possible. Weeks 11 to 12, integration and sustainability. Should now be capable of 3 to 4 hours daily, deep work, additional practices, deep work. Scorecard for tracking progress quarterly. Deep work retreats, accountability partnerships, progressive skill development. The compound effect. If you achieve just 3 hours of genuine deep work per day, 5 days per week, that's approximately 750 hours annually. Compared to someone who never achieves deep focus, this represents an astronomical difference over years. But benefits extend beyond output volume. Deep work builds expertise at an accelerated rate. In a world where shallow work is increasingly automated, deep work capability becomes the scarce and valuable skill. Beyond career success, deep work produces meaning and satisfaction. Research shows our happiest moments come from states of absorbed engagement in challenging activities, exactly what deep work provides. Conclusion: we live in the most distracting environment humans have ever faced. In this context, the ability to eliminate distractions and sustain deep work isn't just a productivity technique. It's a form of resistance against forces that would reduce you to a perpetual consumer of shallow content. Start small. Choose 1 or 2 strategies from this chapter and implement them consistently for 30 days. Perhaps begin with basic distraction elimination. Turn off notifications and implement time blocking. Remember, deep work isn't just about getting more done. It's about doing work that matters, building genuine expertise, and experiencing the profound satisfaction that comes from absorbed engagement with challenging pursuits. In an age of increasing shallowness, choosing depth is both a personal and professional imperative. Your attention is yours, to give or to protect. The path forward is clear. The only question is whether you'll take it. Chapter 5: Sustainable Productivity and Long-Term Growth. Introduction: The New Paradigm of Productivity. For decades, we've been sold a lie. The productivity industry has convinced us that success is about doing more in less time, squeezing every minute for maximum output, and treating ourselves like machines that can be optimized indefinitely. We've been taught to manage our time as if we have an infinite supply of energy, willpower, and mental clarity. But here's the truth that high performers have discovered. Time is renewable, but energy is not. The difference between someone who burns out after a few intense months and someone who maintains peak performance for decades isn't about time management at all. It's about something far more fundamental: energy management. This chapter will transform how you think about productivity by shifting your focus from the clock to your internal resources, from short-term gains to long-term sustainability, and from brute force to intelligent design. Energy management versus time management. Let's start with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you have two workers. One is well-rested, mentally sharp, and emotionally balanced. The other is exhausted, foggy-headed, and running on caffeine and stress. Now give them both the same 8 hours to complete a complex project. Who will produce better results? The answer is obvious, yet most productivity advice ignores this reality. Traditional time management treats all hours as equal. It assumes that if you can just organize your calendar better, use the right apps, or follow the perfect morning routine, you'll achieve more. But this approach fails because it doesn't account for the quality of energy you bring to each task. Energy management recognizes 4 distinct types of energy: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Physical energy is about your body's vitality, determined by sleep, nutrition, and movement. Emotional energy relates to your feelings and stress levels. Mental energy is your capacity for focus, creativity, and problem-solving. Spiritual energy connects to your sense of purpose and meaning. Research from the corporate executive board shows that employees who feel energized are 125% more productive than those who are merely satisfied with their jobs. A study published in the Harvard Business Review found that managing energy, not time, is the key to high performance and personal renewal. Consider Sarah, a software engineer who used to pride herself on working 12-hour days. She tracked every minute, used productivity apps religiously, and felt guilty whenever she wasn't optimizing her time. Yet despite all this effort, her output was inconsistent. Some days she'd code brilliantly. Other days, she'd stare at her screen for hours, producing mediocre work. Everything changed when Sarah shifted to energy management. She started tracking not how long she worked, but how energized she felt during different times of day. She discovered her peak mental clarity occurred between 9 a.m. and noon. She protected these hours fiercely, using them only for her most cognitively demanding work. She also noticed that after intense coding sessions, her mental energy depleted rapidly. Instead of pushing through, she began taking strategic breaks, walking outside, or switching to less demanding tasks. Within 3 months, Sarah's actual productive output increased by 40%, even though she worked fewer total hours. She no longer experienced the afternoon crashes that used to plague her. Most importantly, she could sustain this pace indefinitely because she was working with her natural rhythms rather than against them. Working with your biological rhythms, your body operates on multiple biological cycles, and understanding them is crucial for sustainable productivity. The most well-known is your circadian rhythm, the roughly 24-hour cycle that regulates sleep and wakefulness. But you also have ultradian rhythms, which are 90, 120-minute cycles of high and low alertness that occur throughout the day. Neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman's research reveals that our brains aren't designed for continuous focus. Instead, we naturally oscillate between periods of high alertness and periods that require rest and recovery. The most productive people don't fight these rhythms. They design their days around them. Your circadian rhythm affects everything from hormone production to cognitive function. Cortisol, the hormone that helps you feel alert, naturally peaks about 30 minutes after waking and gradually declines throughout the day. Melatonin, which promotes sleep, begins rising in the evening. Your core body temperature follows a similar pattern, being lowest in the early morning and highest in the late afternoon. These biological facts have practical implications. Most people experience peak mental performance 2 to 4 hours after waking, once cortisol has done its job and the brain has fully activated. This is your golden window for deep work, complex problem-solving, and creative thinking. Research shows that analytical reasoning peaks in the late morning, while creative insight often comes during periods of lower alertness, when your mind makes looser, more unexpected connections. Take Michael, a writer who struggled for years with inconsistent output. He would force himself to write early in the morning because he'd read that all successful writers wake at 5 a.m. But Michael is naturally a night person. His creativity peaked around 9 p.m. when his brain finally relaxed and ideas flowed freely. Once he stopped fighting his chronotype and scheduled his writing for evening hours, his productivity soared, and the quality of his work improved dramatically. The lesson? Stop trying to conform to someone else's ideal schedule. Track your own energy patterns for 2 weeks. Note when you feel most alert, creative, and focused. Then ruthlessly protect those windows for your most important work. Schedule meetings, administrative tasks, and routine work during your lower energy periods. Avoiding burnout and emotional fatigue. Burnout isn't just about working too hard. It's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress and disconnection from meaning. The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon, characterized by 3 dimensions: feelings of energy depletion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. The insidious thing about burnout is that it doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of chronic energy withdrawal without adequate deposits. Imagine your energy as a bank account. Every challenging task, difficult conversation, or stressful situation makes a withdrawal. Rest, joy, connection, and meaningful work make deposits. Burnout occurs when you're overdrawn for too long. Dr. Christina Maslach, a leading burnout researcher, has identified 6 key factors that contribute to burnout: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values. Notice that only one of these is about the amount of work. The others relate to how you experience that work emotionally and spiritually. This explains why 2 people with identical workloads can have vastly different outcomes. One burns out while the other thrives. The difference lies in perceived control over their work, recognition for their efforts, positive relationships with colleagues, fair treatment, and alignment between personal values and organizational goals. Rachel, a hospital nurse, was on the verge of burnout after 8 years in the profession. She loved patient care, but felt overwhelmed by bureaucratic demands, understaffing, and lack of appreciation. Rather than quit, she made strategic changes. She joined a peer support group where nurses shared challenges and celebrated wins. She negotiated for 1 administrative day per week, where she helped improve hospital systems, giving her more control and variety. She also volunteered to mentor new nurses, reconnecting with her sense of purpose. These changes didn't reduce her workload, but they transformed her experience. She felt less isolated, more valued, and more aligned with her core mission of helping others. 2 years later, she reports higher job satisfaction than ever before. The key to avoiding burnout is proactive energy management across all 4 dimensions. Physically, prioritize sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Emotionally, cultivate positive relationships and practice stress reduction techniques. Mentally, take regular breaks and vary your cognitive demands. Spiritually, connect your daily work to larger purposes and values. The compounding effect of small improvements. In his book, Atomic Habits, James Clear popularized the concept of marginal gains. The idea that tiny improvements, when compounded over time, lead to remarkable results. If you improve by just 1% each day, you'll be 37 times better after 1 year. Conversely, if you decline by 1% daily, you'll deteriorate to nearly 0. This principle, first applied systematically by British cycling's performance director Dave Brailsford, transformed a mediocre team into Olympic and Tour de France champions. Brailsford didn't look for one massive breakthrough. Instead, he obsessively sought marginal gains everywhere. Better bike seats, improved tire grip, optimal pillow temperature for sleep, and even teaching riders proper hand washing to reduce illness. Each change was insignificant on its own, but when dozens of 1% improvements were combined and sustained over months and years, the results were extraordinary. The same principle applies to your productivity and personal growth. Consider the impact of small improvements in various areas. Reading 10 pages of a challenging book daily doesn't feel significant. But over a year, you'll complete roughly 12 books, accumulating knowledge that compounds. Writing 250 words daily produces a 90,000-word book in 1 year. Exercising for 20 minutes seems trivial, but doing it consistently transforms your physical and mental health. The math of compounding is counterintuitive because the early results are unremarkable. In the first month of reading 10 pages daily, you've gained knowledge from about 1 book. It doesn't feel transformative. But by month 6, you've read 6 books. By year 3, you've read 36 books in your field, placing you among the top experts. David, an accountant, applied this principle to learning data science. He committed to just 30 minutes of learning daily, using online courses and practice problems. For the first 3 months, progress felt painfully slow. He could barely understand basic concepts, but he persisted. 6 months in, things began clicking. After a year, he'd completed multiple courses and built several projects. 18 months later, he transitioned to a data analyst role with a 40% salary increase. The secret wasn't talent or marathon study sessions. It was consistency and trust in the compounding process. Small improvements work because they're sustainable. You can maintain a 1% improvement indefinitely. But trying to improve 50% all at once leads to burnout and abandonment. This is why sustainable productivity beats heroic bursts. The person who writes for 30 minutes every day will, over a decade, produce far more than someone who occasionally pulls all-nighters. The entrepreneur who improves their business by small increments daily will build something more valuable than one chasing overnight success. To harness compounding, identify your key areas for growth and choose 1 or 2 small, specific improvements in each area. Make them so easy you can't say no. Then track them consistently. The tracking itself reinforces the behavior and lets you see the compound effect over time. Returning to focus after setbacks, life interrupts. Projects fail. Motivation wanes. You'll lose your streak, break your habits, and fall off track. This isn't a sign of weakness. It's an inevitable part of any long-term journey. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't whether they stumble, it's how quickly they get back up. Research on habit formation shows that missing one day has almost no impact on long-term success. Missing 2 days makes recovery harder. Missing 3 days can trigger a complete collapse of the habit. The key is to never miss twice in a row. This principle, which I call the 2-day rule, is remarkably powerful. It acknowledges human imperfection while preventing the downward spiral that destroys momentum. Life happened. You missed your workout or writing session. That's fine. Just don't miss tomorrow. Get back immediately, even if it's a smaller version of your intended action. Jennifer, a marketing executive, used this approach to maintain her exercise habit despite a demanding travel schedule. When work trips disrupted her routine, she wouldn't panic or give up. She'd simply do a 10-minute bodyweight workout in her hotel room. It wasn't her full gym session, but it maintained the identity of being someone who exercises. This flexibility allowed her to sustain her fitness habit for years despite an unpredictable career. The psychology behind quick recovery is about maintaining identity rather than achieving perfection. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. When you write, you vote for being a writer. When you exercise, you vote for being healthy. These votes accumulate into your sense of self. A setback doesn't erase your identity, but prolonged absence can. If you see yourself as disciplined, but then don't practice discipline for weeks, cognitive dissonance creates discomfort. You either resume the behavior to resolve this tension or change your self-perception. Most people take the easier path. They revise their identity downward. Preventing this requires a mindset shift. Don't view returning after a setback as starting over. You're simply continuing your journey after a brief pause. You haven't lost your progress. You've maintained it through rest. This reframing is crucial because shame and self-judgment often prevent people from resuming. They feel they've failed and must now rebuild from zero. This false belief makes getting started again feel overwhelming, so they procrastinate further, deepening the shame spiral. Instead, Practice self-compassion. Acknowledge the setback without harsh judgment. Recognize that everyone encounters obstacles. Then ask yourself, what's the smallest step I can take right now to move forward? Take that step immediately. Momentum, once restarted, builds naturally. This brings us to the final principle of long-term productivity, the mindset that sustains excellence not for months, but for decades. Conclusion: the lifelong value of a productive mindset, the journey beyond technique. We've reached the end of this book, but in many ways, you're standing at the beginning of something far more significant. A lifetime of intentional growth, sustainable productivity, and meaningful achievement. Everything you've learned in these chapters, the strategies for focus, the principles of energy management, the science of habit formation, these are not merely techniques to be applied and forgotten. They are the foundation of a productive mindset that will serve you for decades to come. Let's pause here and consider what we've really been discussing throughout this journey. On the surface, this book has been about productivity. How to get more done, how to focus better, how to build systems that support your goals. But beneath these practical concerns lies something deeper and more transformative. We've been exploring how to live deliberately in a world designed to scatter your attention. How to build a life of purpose in an age of distraction, and how to become the architect of your own potential rather than a passive consumer of whatever circumstances deliver. The true value of a productive mindset isn't measured in tasks completed or goals achieved, though those are welcome outcomes. The real value lies in the person you become through the practice of discipline, clarity, and continuous growth. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you strengthen your capacity for concentration. Every time you push through resistance, you expand your threshold for discomfort. Every time you reflect on your progress and adjust your approach, you deepen your self-awareness and wisdom. Think of productivity not as a destination, but as a practice, much like physical fitness or musical skill. You don't go to the gym for a month and then consider yourself permanently fit. You don't practice piano until you can play one piece perfectly and then set the instrument aside forever. These are lifelong practices that require ongoing commitment, and they reward that commitment with continuous benefits. The same is true for the productive mindset. You don't implement a few strategies and then cruise on autopilot for the rest of your life. You commit to an ongoing practice of intentional living, knowing that the practice itself is the reward. The person who maintains this practice for 5 years is not the same person who began. They've developed mental muscles that most people don't even know exist. They've cultivated an internal locus of control that makes them resilient in the face of challenges. They've built a relationship with themselves based on trust, because they consistently follow through on their commitments. Discipline, the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Throughout this book, we've returned repeatedly to the concept of discipline, and it's fitting that we honor it once more in this conclusion. Discipline has gotten a bad reputation in recent years. It's often portrayed as rigid, joyless, or militaristic. But this is a profound misunderstanding of what discipline truly means and why it matters. Real discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about aligning your daily actions with your deepest values and long-term aspirations. It's about saying yes to your future self, even when your present self wants immediate gratification. It's about building systems that make the right choices easier and the wrong choices harder. The ancient Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in the world, wrote in his private journals about the daily struggle to get out of bed and fulfill his duties. He reminded himself that he was born to work, to contribute, to do what needed to be done regardless of whether it felt easy or pleasant in the moment. This wasn't self-flagellation. It was a clear-eyed recognition that meaningful accomplishment requires consistent effort. Modern neuroscience confirms what the ancient philosophers intuited. Discipline is not an innate trait that some people have and others lack. It's a skill that can be developed through practice. Every act of self-regulation strengthens the neural pathways associated with executive function. Every time you override an impulse in favor of a chosen value, You're literally rewiring your brain to make future acts of discipline easier. But here's what's often missed in discussions of discipline. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's not about never failing. It's about failing forward. The disciplined person doesn't have superhuman willpower or freedom from temptation. They've simply built systems and habits that reduce their reliance on willpower in the first place. Consider the discipline required to maintain physical health. The person who successfully exercises regularly for years hasn't achieved this through daily battles of willpower. They've made exercise a non-negotiable part of their identity and routine. They've removed friction by preparing their gym clothes the night before. They've increased motivation by choosing activities they genuinely enjoy. They've built accountability through workout partners or trainers. In other words, they've used discipline intelligently to create conditions where the disciplined choice becomes the natural choice. This is the kind of discipline worth cultivating, not the white-knuckled variety that depends on constant self-coercion, but the systematic variety that engineers your environment and habits to support your goals. This is discipline that lasts, discipline that compounds, discipline that transforms not just what you do, but who you are. Remember Sarah from our earlier chapters, the software engineer who transformed her productivity through energy management? Her initial commitment to track her energy levels and redesign her workday required discipline. It would have been easier to continue her old patterns, even though they weren't working. But she exercised discipline in service of a larger goal, sustainable high performance. The short-term discipline investment paid dividends that continue to compound years later. The discipline we're advocating isn't about suffering. It's about freedom. It's the recognition that every choice has consequences, and that disciplined choices today create options tomorrow. The person who disciplines themselves to save money has the freedom to weather financial storms or pursue opportunities. The person who disciplines themselves to learn consistently has the freedom to change careers or contribute meaningfully to their field. The person who disciplines themselves to maintain relationships has the freedom of deep connection and support when it matters most. This is the paradox of discipline. It feels like constraint in the moment, but creates freedom over time. And the beautiful thing is that this freedom isn't something you achieve once and possess forever. It's something you practice daily, and through that practice, you become increasingly free. Clarity. The compass for your journey, discipline without direction, is merely busy work. You can be incredibly disciplined at tasks that ultimately don't matter, that don't move you toward anything meaningful. This is why clarity is essential. Clarity about what you want, why you want it, and whether your daily actions are actually getting you there. Throughout this book, we've emphasized the importance of knowing your priorities, defining your goals with precision, and regularly assessing whether your activities align with your objectives. This isn't a one-time exercise. Clarity is something you must actively maintain because the world is constantly trying to obscure it. Every day, you're bombarded with messages about what you should want, who you should be, and how you should spend your time. Social media shows you carefully curated highlights from others' lives, triggering comparison and confusion about your own path. Marketing tells you that happiness lies in the next purchase. Cultural messages suggest that success looks a particular way. Without regular practice of clarity, these external voices drown out your internal compass. Maintaining clarity requires deliberate practices, regular reflection, journaling, reviewing your goals, asking yourself tough questions about whether you're living according to your values. These practices might seem indulgent or unnecessary when you're busy with the demands of daily life. But they're actually essential maintenance for the most important project you'll ever undertake: building a life that feels authentic and meaningful to you. Consider David from our earlier example, the accountant who transitioned to data science through consistent daily learning. His clarity about wanting to change careers, combined with discipline in taking daily action, made that transformation possible. But that clarity didn't appear magically. He developed it through honest self-assessment. What did he enjoy about his current work? What frustrated him? What kind of problems did he want to solve? What skills excited him? By getting clear on these questions, He could identify a target and chart a course toward it. Clarity also involves understanding your constraints and working within them, rather than wishing they didn't exist. If you're raising young children, your available time and energy differ from someone without family responsibilities. Clarity means acknowledging this reality and designing a productive life that fits your actual circumstances, not some imaginary ideal situation. This kind of clear-eyed realism is far more empowering than fantasy. Moreover, clarity about your priorities helps you say no to opportunities that, while potentially good, aren't good for you right now. Every yes to something is a no to something else. When you're clear about what matters most, you can decline requests, invitations, and projects that would diffuse your focus without guilt or regret. You're not missing out. You're staying faithful to your chosen path. The practice of clarity also includes recognizing when your goals need to change. Life evolves, you evolve, and what mattered intensely 5 years ago might not resonate anymore. Clarity means being honest about these shifts rather than persisting with goals that no longer serve you out of stubbornness or fear of appearing inconsistent. The goal is not rigid adherence to a plan made by a younger, different version of yourself. The goal is alignment between who you are now and what you're working toward. This kind of adaptive clarity requires both conviction and flexibility, a combination that might seem contradictory but is actually essential for long-term success. You need conviction about your core values and general direction, which provides stability and purpose. But you also need flexibility about specific goals and methods, which allows you to adapt as circumstances change and you learn more about yourself and the world. Continuous growth, the infinite game. Perhaps the most important idea in this entire book is this: productivity and personal development are infinite games, not finite ones. A finite game has a defined endpoint, clear winners and losers, and fixed rules. An infinite game has no endpoint. The goal is to keep playing, to keep growing, to keep engaging with the process itself. When you view productivity as a finite game, you're always asking, am I there yet? Have I achieved enough? Can I stop now? This mindset leads to burnout when you're striving and dissatisfaction when you've achieved your goal and wonder, what now? But when you embrace productivity and growth as infinite games, you ask different questions. How am I developing? What am I learning? How can I contribute? Who am I becoming? This shift in perspective is liberating. It means you never have to feel like you're behind or that you've missed your chance. Every day is an opportunity to continue playing, to make another move, to experiment and learn. Failure isn't elimination from the game. It's feedback that helps you play better. Success isn't the end. It's a moment to appreciate before returning to the practice. The mindset of continuous growth recognizes that there's always another level, always something new to learn, always ways to refine and improve. This isn't exhausting when you embrace it. It's energizing. It means life never becomes stale or predictable. There's always frontier to explore, whether in your professional skills, personal relationships, creative pursuits, or understanding of yourself. Consider the master craftspeople who spend decades perfecting their art. A master carpenter doesn't stop learning about wood after 20 years. They continue discovering new techniques, understanding materials more deeply, and pushing the boundaries of what they can create. Their mastery isn't a static achievement. It's a dynamic engagement with their craft that deepens over time. The same can be true for your approach to productivity and personal effectiveness. This philosophy of continuous growth also helps you maintain perspective during difficult periods. When you encounter setbacks, when progress seems slow, when you feel like you're not where you should be, remembering that you're playing an infinite game helps you stay patient and persistent. You don't need to achieve everything immediately because you have a lifetime to develop. It also means celebrating small wins and incremental progress rather than waiting for some distant milestone to feel satisfied. If growth is the goal rather than a specific destination, then any movement forward is success worth acknowledging. This creates a positive feedback loop where you feel encouraged by your progress, which motivates continued effort, which generates more progress. The infinite game mindset also changes how you relate to others. Instead of viewing peers as competitors who might reach the finish line before you, you can see them as fellow players whose success doesn't diminish your own. You can learn from them, collaborate with them, celebrate their achievements, because you're all engaged in the same ongoing practice of growth and contribution. This brings us to perhaps the most profound aspect of continuous growth: its cumulative effect over decades. When you commit to growing 1% better consistently over years, the compound effect is extraordinary. The person you become at age 50, after 20 years of continuous growth, is unrecognizable compared to who you were at 30. You've accumulated wisdom, skills, experiences, and perspectives that are impossible to rush or shortcut. Think of continuous growth as building a vast, intricate cathedral. Each day you lay a few bricks. Some days you place them well, other days less so. But you keep building. Individual bricks don't look impressive, and even weeks of work might not reveal the emerging structure. But over years, something magnificent takes shape, something that reflects your dedication, learning, and evolution. This is the promise and the practice of a productive life. Not a perfect life, not a life without struggles or setbacks, but a life characterized by intentional effort, continuous learning, and steady progress toward becoming the person you're capable of being. Your personal journey. The path forward. Now comes the most important part of this entire book: what you do next. Everything we've discussed, the strategies, principles, and insights, means nothing without implementation. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. The question isn't whether these ideas are true or useful. The question is whether you'll integrate them into your daily life. And here's what I want you to know: you don't have to do everything at once. In fact, you shouldn't. Trying to implement dozens of new habits and strategies simultaneously is a recipe for overwhelm and abandonment. Instead, choose one or two practices that resonated most deeply with you. Start small. Build consistency. Then, once those practices feel natural, add another. Maybe you begin with the 2-day rule: never miss your most important habit 2 days in a row. Maybe you start tracking your energy patterns to understand your biological rhythms. Maybe you establish a weekly review practice to maintain clarity about your priorities. Whatever you choose, commit to it fully for at least 30 days. Give it a fair chance to prove its value in your life. Remember that your journey will be unique. The specific strategies and approaches that work for you might differ from what works for others. This is fine. The goal isn't to follow someone else's playbook perfectly. It's to discover and develop your own productive system that aligns with your values, circumstances, and aspirations. You'll encounter resistance. Your enthusiasm will wane. You'll have periods where maintaining your practices feels difficult. This is normal and expected. What matters is how you respond. Will you use a difficult period as an excuse to abandon your commitment, or will you see it as an opportunity to practice resilience? The choice is always yours, and you're making that choice every single day. Be patient with yourself. Growth is not linear. Some weeks you'll feel like you're making tremendous progress. Other weeks you'll feel stuck or even like you're moving backwards. Over the long term, if you stay committed to the practice, the overall trajectory moves upward. Trust the process, even when immediate results aren't visible. Seek support and accountability. Share your goals with people who will encourage your growth. Find or create communities of people committed to similar practices. Having others on the journey with you makes it more sustainable and enjoyable. We're social creatures. We thrive in connection, especially when pursuing meaningful goals. Celebrate your progress. Take time regularly to acknowledge how far you've come. It's easy to focus on the gap between where you are and where you want to be, but it's equally important to recognize the distance you've already traveled. You're not the same person who started reading this book. You've gained insights and awareness that have already begun transforming your approach to productivity and growth. Final reflections: the productive life. Well lived. As we close this book, I want to leave you with a final thought about what all of this is really for. Productivity isn't an end in itself. The goal isn't to become a human doing machine that churns out tasks efficiently until you die. The goal is to use productivity principles to create space and capacity for what genuinely matters. Meaningful work, deep relationships, creative expression, contribution to others, and moments of joy and wonder. The productive mindset, when properly understood, is actually a path to greater presence and peace. When you've cultivated the discipline to focus deeply, you can engage fully with whatever you're doing rather than being mentally scattered. When you've achieved clarity about your priorities, you can invest in relationships and experiences without guilt or nagging feeling that you should be doing something else. When you've built systems that handle routine tasks efficiently, you free up mental and emotional energy for what can't be systematized. Love, creativity, spontaneity, and connection. This is the paradox and the promise. The structure of discipline creates freedom. The practice of planning enables spontaneity. And the focus on productivity ultimately serves presence. You become more productive not to do more things, but to do the right things well and to have space for life beyond doing. So go forward from this book with confidence. You have the knowledge and tools you need. What you do with them is up to you. Your life is waiting to be shaped by your intentions and actions. The productive mindset you develop over the coming months and years will be one of the most valuable assets you ever cultivate. It will serve you in every area of life, through every season and challenge. The journey of continuous growth and intentional living is the most meaningful adventure available to us. It's a journey without a final destination, which means you can begin right now, wherever you are, with whatever you have. The best time to start was yesterday. The second best time is today. Begin small. Stay consistent. Trust the process. Celebrate progress. Be patient with setbacks. Keep growing. Keep building. Keep becoming. Your productive life, your meaningful life, your extraordinary life, it starts now.